The man could fight, the man could recruit, and the man could energize. That's what you need in a warrior. So many generals failed Lincoln. He traded them like Pokemon cards. Well, this is his foil Charizard. This is his foil Charizard.
Good. Oh my god, that ending.
I love the passion.
All right, so welcome to Questioning History. We're a group of guys with all the questions, but none of the answers. Still ask them anyways. And I'm joined here today by two Jonathans. We have first Jonathan Woody from Warhawk and Jonathan Teagan of Civil War Week by Week. How are you guys doing?
Good.
I'm good, yeah.
And, in case the audience, for whatever reason, hasn't even heard of you, I just want to give you guys a chance, just tell us a bit about your channel, starting with perhaps Woody.
So my channel, I'm the co-author of a channel called Warhawk. It's an animated battle map documentary channel where we make map documentaries of battles from the Civil War. I'm the lead script writer and director, so to say, of the videos. And then my partner in the channel, Gene Harrington, or known by Saris, is the animator and the narrator. So we work well together and get the videos out in like 2 a month usually.
Awesome. Actually, it's almost identical to how History Dose does his content. It's two brothers who are doing everything.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And Teagan, tell us about Civil War Week by Week.
Well, as the name suggests, I'm a finance YouTuber who gives advice on NFT and crypto. No, I am the sole creator and everything, and the sole beneficiary of the hate comments that have yet to come in, actually, since no one watched my channel, where I cover the Civil War week by week and see how much I can copy from Wikipedia before someone catches on.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton.
Yeah.
And well, I can attest, having to be the guy doing for Kings and Generals Pacific War week by week, the week by week format sucks and it's very hard to keep up. So you keep fighting that, Teagan. And for the audience who might not already know how the format works for the debate episode, we give everybody 90 seconds to make their point, and then they get 60 seconds to trash on the other two. And usually no one talks over the other, but it does happen. I'm the editor. I've seen some of the footage. And I think, we can just jump right into it. And we got an interesting question to start off with. In terms of significance, where do you rank the American Civil War compared to other wars the United States was involved in?
So I would say you mean on a world scale or just in like national level for the United States?
I would
guess
national level, I would say, just bound
Yeah,
by the United States.
So do you want us to give like a number and be like, oh, this is where I'd rank it, or do you want us to like give a more impactful war? Or, yeah, how do you want to do the debate?
How about you, to change things up, give me a more impactful war the United States was involved in, more so than the Civil War?
Well, I guess in terms of within living memory, I suppose World War II would be a more impactful war, just because we have a lot of people. Well, I mean, there's less and less every day, but I mean, we still have like people who remember, like, say, rationing, the home front. So World War II, I suppose, would be a more impactful war on today's society because more people remember it than, say, the Civil War, which was 160 years ago versus 80 years ago.
Well,
Right.
if we're going to allow Woody to take World War II, which is honestly the big one,
Yeah.
but
Good shot.
it's a debate, so anyone can win. You just gotta destroy them.
I would go for Vietnam.
I assumed the British guy would talk about one of those wars that what happened again? Yes, the colonists, they overthrew you guys. Yes.
Yeah,
Teagan?
but we're doing impactful, right? Like, come on now.
Okay. All right.
Then I'll go, just to throw a curveball, I'll go the Second Opium War, which we were barely a part of.
Ooh, you're in my
Ooh.
backyard. Something I've covered extensively. Okay.
You do
Okay.
opium? Nice.
I love opium. I'm always in the dens. You know what? Let's Pete, you want to jump in first?
Yeah, okay, I'll give it a go.
All right.
Okay, Vietnam is definitely the most influential war in American history, not just because of the political ramifications of effectively, one of the times where the Cold War got hot, and not just because of the mentality behind stopping communism in Southeast Asia, but also the cultural impact that Vietnam had on the home front. I think it really is the sort of like turning point in the American zeitgeist where, like, previously there was this idea of like the golden generation and that America was sort of infallible in some ways, and it come back off the back of 2 world wars, and that it was always on the sort of right side of history. But Vietnam was like the first war where people at home could see what was happening, could see the reality of warfare, and suddenly begin to question the mentality behind, well, is this actually like, are we actually the good guys in this scenario if we're sort of going across half the world and imposing our ideal of government on people? Is this necessarily the right way to be doing things? And like how that then interacts with the civil rights movement, how that interacts with like the Nixon administration later on. It really is a turning point in the mentality of America.
Done. You know what? You really turned. I didn't think you had a good one at the beginning, but you got a banger. Yeah, it's a good choice. How about Woody next?
So even though I agree that Vietnam was a huge turning point in American history in terms of that's when like the whole American psyche was kind of thrown off from its kind of pedestal. World War II is what put them on that pedestal, because the World War II is what put America on the front and center of the world stage, and it was where, excuse me, they kind of overtook the British as the prime, like I guess the policemen of the world, which then led into the situations in Korea and Vietnam. So World War II, in terms of being more significant than the Civil War, in that regard, is important because it's what literally propels the United States to the global superpower #1. So World War II is just it's what really forges the American power, I guess you could say, in the world.
You got 20 more seconds. You good?
Yeah, I think I'm good.
All right. And now a really interesting one, Tegan. I'm interested as to what you're going to say about this. Go ahead.
You see it on the news. China, the new threat, the old empire that, well, started its decline because some Brit boys were trying to get people hooked on drugs. And where did the revolutionaries come from? America, really. But why didn't they follow the American path? 1850s. We have the rise of the new American empire and the decline of the Qing. They're looking for a model to modernize, but of course it's hard. There's revolutionaries, but most of all, they're getting a little bit too big for their britches, according to, again, some pasty white boys. And with that decline of that empire, we see the birth of a new idea of modernization to take on the West. And that's what we see today. West versus East divide. And with the new global superpowers, we can start to see how America likes to meddle in some foreign business, and how those foreign businesses seem that their only way is to meddle right back. The Second Opium War was America's introduction into the Far East. And you can tell by today, we haven't quite exited yet.
All right, good. This is a really interesting blend. I assumed we were going to get World War I, World War II, and the Revolutionary War. but we got some picks here. So Pete, please try to go to town on this.
World War II, a bold choice considering barely even an American war. You guys took your time to turn up for that one. And
Glad we made a difference though.
as for America, like putting itself on the grand stage, like those mechanisms were already in place during World War One. Like World War II, yeah, fine. That's where they can show that they can actually flex their power. But those mechanisms and those infrastructures, they're basically in place since World War One. So I'm not having that as a point. Opium Wars, yeah, you made a good case for why it's an interesting war. You made a good case for why it's interesting on a global stage. I'm not really hearing why it's impactful for America in particular. A little bit of involvement in the East, come on now. This is barely a point in its favor. You're comparing this to like Vietnam, which is a genuine turning point in generations where it changes the American mentality forever, ruins the American dream, and brings it down to reality.
Done. All right. Woody?
So Vietnam is an important conflict in American history and all, and it is important for the American psyche, ruining the whole American dream and bringing it to reality and all. But World War II is still the conflict that kind of built up Americans as like feeling like they're the number one power, and yeah, we can take on the world. And so as important as Vietnam is, World War II is what kind of, I mean, people talk more about World War II today than say Vietnam because it's a more, I guess you could say, popular topic in the sense that, you know, we're not the bad guys, so to speak. And the first opium war, or sorry, it was second opium war. I mean, yes, it is where it is important in terms of stepping our foot into imperialism, but it doesn't really impact Americans in general in the population.
Done. All right. Finish us off, Tegan.
As we all know, the Vietnam War ended the American dream, and we decided to no longer interfere in the Far East. Well, until 4 years later when we got involved in Afghanistan. But we never put troops in another foreign country until Grenada a couple years later. But it ruined the American dream until 5 years later when Ronald Reagan was elected, restoring the American dream in the popular psyche. It brought down Nixon until he was rehabilitated a couple years later. Seems like we really got over that entire crushing of the American dream pretty quickly. And of course, World War II, great economic boom. We haven't seen anything since the last World War brought an economic boom, but it was the first time we thought we were on the top of the world stage until, well, I guess it was 1919 when we started getting involved with Russia and started the Cold War. But you're right, China has no impact with America today, and their hatred of us really doesn't matter.
Nice. Well, the audience will choose who they think won this, but it's pretty close. Honestly, you guys made excellent points. It's really interesting how that went.
Yeah, these are going to be some good ones.
Yeah. The second question is a good one too, and it's one that I would be interested in myself. I have to ask you, what is the biggest misconception about the American Civil War?
Oh, I have a good one for this. That
Britain was responsible?
always in some way always responsible. But no, the North started the war because of slavery.
Okay, you're taking the big boy one there. All right.
I suppose I'll go with that it was, I'm trying to think on this one. I guess if you're going to say that the North was starting it because of slavery, the South was fighting for exclusively slavery, I suppose.
Yeah, okay. That we got the two biggies there. Tegan, do you have anything in mind?
Biggest misconception at the Civil War. I'll go that with that that the South was a libertarian area.
Ooh,
Okay. I
you
didn't
and Woody
expect
are
that.
gonna be butting heads on this one.
Yeah. Well, since Pete, you went first, we'll let Woody start us off this time.
Okay, so one of the biggest misconceptions of the Civil War is that the South was fighting exclusively over slavery. And I know this is gonna be a controversial topic, but when it came to the common soldier in the Confederate Army in the Civil War, they believed they were not fighting necessarily for slavery. They were fighting for the right to own slaves for sure, but it wasn't just, oh, we're fighting because some rich guy wants to keep their slaves in South Carolina. The biggest misconception of the Civil War is that all Southerners were just trying to fight to keep their slaves, and that was basically that. That's it. End of story. One of the biggest issues with the Southern soldiers in the army was that they were trying to fight for what they believed was states' rights. And during the Civil War, the Confederate government had to kind of devise a way to make it sound like for the common soldier that they are fighting for their rights and state rather than we want you to fight for us because we want to keep our slaves down here in like South Carolina and Louisiana. No common soldier is going to fight for that. So what they need to do is spin the story around so that the common soldier will die for the Confederate cause. And yeah, that's basically the gist of it.
All right. Tegan, you want to go next?
Sure. When we talk about important misconceptions, they usually have to come up today. And as an American who's chronically online, let's talk politics.
Oh boy.
If we're going to see, we try to usually find historical precedent for our divides. So really it's become the Union North is the Democratic Party and the Confederate South is the Republican Party. And to not start a political science major off in the comment section, I'll just go with the idea that people usually associate the South with a more laissez-faire form of living, which just wasn't true back in the day. War necessitates, well, for the victor usually, a certain amount of trade-off. That's why the South had a huge crackdown on freedom of speech, because you don't want people arguing against you, or else it's going to be harder to get those recruits. And when they didn't have enough recruits, well, they drafted them, being the first draft in American history. When it came to fighting the war, the South didn't have a lot of the on-paper benefits. So they crushed down on certain things. And when it came to industry that wasn't cooperating, well, they tried their best to force them to cooperate. They were just as devoted to an authoritarian war style as any country in war.
Very nice. Pete?
It was good. Okay. This might not be a misconception to sort of scholars of the American Civil War like you guys, but I think in the general mentality, there is an idea that the North went to war to abolish slavery, that this was a motivating factor in the declaration of war. And Lincoln, in his first inaugural address, made it clear that like abolition of slavery was not part of the agenda, wasn't really on the cards at the time. Like the reason for the North going to war was almost purely just to hold the Union together, to keep the states united in that sense. Like the process of abolitionists were still a thing at the time, and the abolition movement does grow during the course of the war. And there is then a need, like once there are more African-American soldiers fighting on the Union side, it becomes more of an issue. And then it does become an aim of the North to get slavery abolished. But it wasn't one of the motivating factors that that was there at the start. And I think that that is something which people who, especially people who aren't American and who look from an outside perspective at the Civil War, often do think of it as it was very simple war, basically over one side wanting to stop slavery, one side wanting to continue slavery. And it's a complete misconception because the North is only about the Union. The slavery question only appears later during the war, not at the start.
All right. Let me just add, Pete, in high school, we're taught about the American Civil War, maybe a paragraph worth, and it's just slavery. Was it the same for you? I'm just curious.
I'm not even sure if I was ever taught anything about the American Civil War actually in school. Like, I mean, I would have come across it in other readings, but I can't remember having any lesson in history class where, you know, it was discussed. Yeah, I think people here are just aware of it, that it happened, and I think do have this misconception that it's North trying to abolish slavery, South trying to keep slavery, and that's it.
Well, bring it back to Woody. You can now destroy them both.
So I'm gonna be honest, I'm kind of having a hard time understanding what Tegan's argument is with the parties and all that. But I guess I'll start with Pete. So even though you are right in the fact that the Civil War, when it started, the Union was fighting specifically to keep the Union together, not necessarily fighting to abolish slavery. There were many sects of abolitionists and radical Republicans, as they were known as throughout the country, who did want to abolish slavery from the get-go, such as abolitionists William Lloyd Garrison, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Beecher Stowe. They all believed that when the war started, it was already going to be an issue, such as when General Benjamin Butler had to take the quote unquote contraband slaves from the Confederates. They were already making it an issue for the government to deal with.
Done. All right. Tegan, what do you got to say?
Well, luckily, you two have a very similar thing. Woody, what individual soldier fought for, you can really only argue on the individual level. When it comes to trying to teach history, you have to paint with broad strokes, or else you're going to get sucked in a sandpit of week by week coverage that never ends. And yeah, and we know that the South seceded because they saw Lincoln not being willing to allow slavery to expand as a threat to their business. Sure, not every individual soldier fought for that. But if you're trying to teach the stuff in 30 minutes or less, then you have to get down. And Peter, North didn't start the war. The South fired on Fort Sumter first. And from the very beginning, even President Lincoln wanted the abolition of slavery. He said he wanted no modification. His often expressed wish that everyone everywhere could be free. He never promised to do it. But the fun fact about politicians is they're pretty sneaky. By not letting slavery expand, he could get enough senators to get an amendment passed eventually. So in the end, the war centered around slavery.
Done. All right, Pete.
In regards to Woody, I would echo Tegan's point that we can't know the motivation of the individual. We can only know the motivations of the political entity they're fighting for, and the political entity of the South was fighting to keep their slave rights. That was at the end of the day, that was the big issue for the Southern states. For Tegan's point, which I think is about whether the South were liberalists or not. I mean, again, just like you said to Woody, I think it's impossible to speculate about people's motivations, but if they were liberalists or whether they weren't liberalists. And I think it's hard, given the context of war, where many things have to be put on hold in order to fight a war successfully, to be able to broadly just paint them as, no, they weren't liberal, they weren't liberalists, there was all this kind of things. You have to compromise in war, that's fair. And as for Woody's point about like the abolitionists who were in the Republican Party, that's true, but as you say, they were radical, they were fringe, they weren't really there in the center at the start of it.
Done. Okay. All right.
Damn, I don't know. I feel really bad now that I said like the Union started the war. I just meant at the start. Damn,
Yeah,
you, Tegan.
Got you. It is an interesting question though for those of us who aren't from the United States. What we know about the American Civil War. I mean, I guess it's different for me because Canada just learns American history. Ours is too boring. So, we're taught a bit about the Civil War, and it's actually responsible for the forming of our country. But the biggest misconception, yeah, it's well, basically it's both Woody's and Peter's, I would say. I mean, I would assume that's for the rest of the world too. It's just about the slavery.
Yeah, I think that probably is. Hmm.
There's no nuance to that. Like, all this cotton, who is buying the most of it? Mr. Pete.
But
And,
that's
I feel like it's a very black and white, because people like to categorize things
literally.
in history. I feel like it's a very black and white thing with the Civil War, where one side's fighting for good and one side's fighting for evil. There's
Yeah.
always gray in between in any historical situation. I always like to say the quote from I don't remember I think it was George Patton who said it about the Germans in World War II. He's like, all Nazis are evil, but not all Germans are Nazis, or something like that. I don't remember if it was Patton or someone else who said that, but
Pretty sure it was Patton.
yeah.
And I think, honestly, if I had to pick a best point of that debate, it had to be when Woody mentioned, for the common soldier, like the idea that the message was, we're fighting so some other rich guys can keep their slaves. It really kind of, that really crushes the conception, a little bit there.
Although surely on some level, like, they must have known, right?
Oh,
Of
Like,
course.
like
Yeah.
the everyman must have known that, like, even if it's like dressed up with certain bells and whistles and put in a fancy dress, like, they must still know that, like, at the end of the day, it's about slave rights.
Yeah. All right. So
Although I don't know if that is the case. Maybe it wasn't.
what was that? It's a car. Next question. I want you to pick a bloody battle during the American Civil War. It's quite a few to choose from.
That's it.
For now. There'll be a
Okay.
twist.
I'll go with the Battle of Antietam, bloodiest single day in American history.
You
I'll
got one
go
in mind.
Shiloh.
Okay.
I'll take the crater.
I know this one, Pete. You had to tell me about this one. Okay. So the twist to this question is, why would you be most likely to survive this battle? against
Yes,
the
I
other
called
choices?
it.
So yeah, Woody kind of, I guess. Well, actually, I don't know. Pete, you got a pretty bad one too.
I don't know. I've got an ace up my sleeve. I think I got something good for this.
I should just be like,
Oh,
yes,
how
Pete,
would you
you're
survive
in
the crater? Don't fall in the crater.
Yeah. Okay, you know what, Pete? Okay, wait, no. Tegan can go first because it's true. You already went first, Pete.
So, Shiloh is known as the place where Grant got his butcher's bill, but it was pretty early in the war, and that's why it was considered so bloody. We really hadn't seen the true tears war could bring. I'm going to join the Union because I live in St. Louis, and St. Louis always stayed in the Union, which meant I have two options of really armies to be, in Shiloh with. Army of Tennessee, which saw quite a bit of fighting, and then there's the Army of Ohio, which only came in on the second day. You go to the Army of Ohio, bada bing, bada boom, you're pretty overall safe. Compare it to other battles later in the war with casualty rates beyond 20%, 30%. Shiloh, pretty survivable. The Confederates don't have the best muskets. I mean, the hospitals aren't already getting overrun with people. And it isn't even as bloody a battle where it really stops the movement of the war for long, as soon Grant and Buell were moving on. You really have a pretty good shot of surviving Shiloh and then getting killed at some later battle, like, I don't know, the Crater or Antietam, which were complete bloodbaths, would really show what was what. But Shiloh, yeah, newspapers really did say it was bloody, but that's because they ain't seen nothing yet.
Perfect. Well done. Pete, let's explain how you're gonna get out of that crater.
Okay, yeah, Battle of the Crater is a tricky one. So I'm gonna have to come at it from this is a bit of a dark angle, but it's the only angle I've got to survive it. I would survive the Battle of the Crater because I'm white, basically.
Oh my god!
Like, if I'm on the Union side, like, it was a tragic loss of African American lives, but basically it was a needless sacrifice of African American lives. As a white guy, I think I'm going to be pretty okay with it. I'll just be like standing back, watching the tragedy unfold. I'm not going to be like committed into it. I'm not going to be in the. I can't remember the name of the specific unit. One of you guys will probably actually know the specific unit who gets like sent in. But yeah, as a white guy, I'm not going to be involved in it. That's how I'm surviving the battle.
Okay, you can finish with that, and I'm probably going to clip that one.
I would like to be the first one to respond to that one.
Go
too.
Yeah.
But Antietam. So the Battle of Antietam, bloodiest single day in American history, with 23,000 casualties at the end of 12 hours of fighting. However, at least from the Union side, McClellan only committed like, I can't remember the exact number, but it's somewhere around like maybe a half to 2/3 of his forces in the Army of the Potomac. So like almost all of Fifth Corps, except for one division of the Fifth Corps in the Army of the Potomac, wasn't even engaged at Antietam. They just sat there and watched the battle unfold from the sidelines. On the Confederate side, if I were to pick a way to survive, I'd probably want to be in Robert Toombs' brigade, because they were the ones holding Burnside's bridge. And they did, except for the fighting at Burnside's bridge, they basically, the only reason they had to fall back at the end of that fighting was because they ran out of ammo. So I would say that being in Toombs' brigade would be a good way to survive in the Confederacy. And then in the Union, I just want to be in Fifth Corps, I suppose. Then I could survive the Battle of Antietam. I could say I was there and not have done anything at all.
Done. And wow. Good luck to the rest of you. He just named both sides and specific units to be part of. Oh boy. But Woody, did you want to go first to attack the crater, you had said?
I did, because I actually have a good explanation for how you would still die.
Go for it. I want to hear it.
So first of all, at the Battle of the Crater, when the explosion first started and the Union launched their attack, it was actually a bunch of white guys that started the attack in front of the USCT troops. And the problem is they, because General Meade wanted to make sure that it didn't look like they were sending black troops into the slaughter, which they still ended up doing. But they started by having a bunch of exhausted white troops from 9th Corps launch the attack. And they didn't even know the plan, basically. They had like maybe a day to study it, whereas the USCT troops had like all this planning made for it. So when they get to the crater, they're told just don't go into the crater. But naturally, they go up to, they see a big ass hole and they're like, whoa. And then they all start going into it. So, and if you're an officer in the USCT, you're still probably going to get killed. Now, for Shiloh, I mean, if you're in the Army of the Ohio, you still have a good chance of getting killed, because the second day they did a lot of bloody fighting.
Done. Jeez. I don't know if Pete, do you want to follow that one up?
I mean,
from the front?
I feel like I'm dead already.
Yeah, you are.
But I can try. Okay. Okay. The problem with both of you is like at Shiloh, you're putting your confidence in a guy who's renowned for being perfectly happy to sacrifice as many lives as needed to win the battle. Like, Grant is a great general, but he has no qualms about committing men into battle, and like he's not gonna just like hold back if he needed to. This is not someone that I want commanding me. I would rather have someone like McClellan, who's a bit of a coward and a little bit like more passive, got good ways of solving that. But the problem there is that he's just he's incompetent on a battlefield. He's like great on the drill parade and everything like that. Incompetent on the battlefield. I don't want to be fighting under either of those guys. For the crater, if I'm on the Confederate side, by the way, I'm obviously gravy. Like if I'm on the Confederate side, so long as I'm not like standing on the mine, gravy, gonna be surviving that. If I'm going into the crater, loads of people are dying. I'm just playing dead.
Done. All right, Tegan.
Well, Woody, I'm very glad that if you are in one corps, you'll be doing great. Now, I'm not sure how much you can choose with that. As being a conscript, you get moved around a lot. And while, yeah, the Army of the Ohio did get engaged quite a bit, I mean, is it anything compared to what the Union suffered in the cornfield or Bloody Lane, which I'm sure was a name earned for its lovely sights and peacefulness? Now, Peter, I mean, yeah, you could be a Confederate, but I mean, one, good luck, buddy. You're going to have a hard time getting to a Confederate all the way from England during the time of the blockade. More importantly, you're ready to die of disease a couple of days later. Battles don't end. They are. Well, the Battle of Shiloh was such a mess that certain Confederate brigades barely got engaged, especially with some of the reserves. I mean, when you have such a mess.
I like that he threw that British part at the end, because it's true. You just all of a sudden picked your race at the offset, so you kind of opened the door to it.
Yeah, I know. I didn't think about that.
You should have been like, yeah, I'm an advisor from Britain, just watching from the side.
Ah, that would have been great. Yes, that obviously would have been the way to go. Oh,
See that guy
that's
from Gettysburg who's just there to watch.
yeah.
Picnic.
Does that make me a news reporter?
Yeah.
God
Hey,
damn
during
it.
the Civil War, they had to have correspondents from Britain. Were there some from other countries? I guess France, maybe.
Yeah, there were some from Germany, I believe.
Oh,
Yeah.
of course, Prussians and
There
Germans
was-
won.
The one that I can think of from Great Britain, at least, is I believe his name was William Howard Russell. He's the guy who was the Crimean War correspondent, and they sent him over at the start of the Civil War. So he was reporting on like the Manassas campaign, and I think he left after like the spring of '62 or something, like right before the Peninsula campaign. But I know he was like one of the main like popular war correspondents from Britain at the time.
So I was gonna say it should have terrified a lot of the European nations, the amount of carnage in this war, because it basically predicts what's happening in the later half of the 19th century and how bad things are going to get for like Crimean War, the Franco-Prussian War and stuff.
Yeah.
Can I just have like 1 second? I just want to refill my water. I'll be right back.
Yeah, sure.
I feel like it's good entertainment for him though, just reading it in the newspaper. Oh, Grant is moving his army.
Oh, the colonists are separated. Oh no, how
There's
terrible!
There's actually a quote from Russell where he says, "Man could live to see the rise of the Republic and live to see its fall," or something after the Manassas campaign.
Jeez.
So
Oh boy.
I was actually just in the War of Rights gaming Discord. I do a series of posts on the history of the Civil War. I just recently covered the Trent Affair, where Britain almost went to war with the United States over the. I don't know if you've heard of the situation. Yeah, because they sent like I think it's like 4,000 troops or something from the British Army into Canada. And they sat up there for like the entirety of the war, and some of them actually got so bored they went into the Union Army.
Yeah, it's kind of like those minor things that you hear about where Canada kind of dug its fingers in. I mean, there's volunteers who fought in the war, but they were just kind of Americans who resided in Canada and kept moving and stuff.
Right. Like I'm sure there was probably a case of like one or two black people who had like escaped up to Canada from the Underground Railroad. There's probably cases of one or two of them coming back to fight for the Union.
Yeah, I would imagine, because our province of Nova Scotia was basically just built from the British moved a bunch of African slaves after the Revolutionary War. So that was the main population of blacks in Canada for the longest time. They're basically the only ones. So I imagine some of them signed up and did stuff.
And there was the Bermudan soldiers in the 54th Massachusetts.
Bermuda,
There's
wow.
actually, I remember reading there was a guy from like, I think it was like Ghana or something, like what would become the country of Ghana, who actually like was reading about the Union cause, and he actually like came over to America to fight for the Union Army. And I think he was in one of the USCT regiments, and he was literally an African guy who came over to America to fight for the Union cause.
It says a lot.
They were a lot more
Yeah.
bored back then.
Oh, so with the magic of editing, Pete is back from writing his notes. And we got the question, I'll call it. It is the main question a lot of alternate history people love. What single change could be made to lead to the Southern victory?
Like what? How big can we make this change? Because I would say the
anything.
Union surrendering.
It's a pretty good change, I'd say.
But could you? I mean, I think you would be able to. I think you could debate that, so long as you could argue
If
that
it got
it would
bloody
be
enough.
realistic.
Hey, it's what the Japanese were banking on in World War II. Their whole
I'm
strategy
gonna
was
go-
that.
I'm gonna go with the Confederates winning, not Gettysburg, but Antietam.
Okay. You got one, Pete?
Wait, I seriously got away with that?
I mean, you got to make it credible. You can't be like, okay, well, aliens attacked, so they all just cast aside, their.
Yeah,
No.
you have to make the case that it's like a credible course of action for the Union to take. I guess I'll go with. Sorry, can you just restate the question?
What single change could lead to a Southern victory? Single change. I don't know if that.
I guess I'll go with.
necessarily-
I don't quite know how to phrase this, but basically having like a more professional structure to their army.
Okay. So Tegan, are you sure you want to go with yours?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm feeling pretty
'Cause
confident.
if you could sell the story, then you could sell the story. I mean, it's possible, of course. We'll let Pete. You can go first again.
All right. So far as I understand how things went down in the South's organization of their armies, they were almost more akin to a sort of glorified militia, broken down by regions rather than having like a cohesive structure in the way that the North had a cohesive structure. And there is, and like result of that is that you get like Lee not having command of the entire Southern forces. He's just general of the Army of Virginia. And you get Southern generals who don't cooperate or won't cooperate with each other because of personal issues without having like a hierarchy that dictates that they have to. And like the South is going into this war already at a disadvantage when it comes to numbers and when it comes to resources. And the only way that you could potentially compensate for that is by consolidating your forces and trying to get into as all going in one direction as possible to try and hit a few quick wins early. The fact that they have got this sort of divided command structure going up against a more organized one was always going to end in disaster. And if they had actually managed to get a more cohesive military organization going, then they might have been able to leverage more of the power of the South into areas where it needed to be, like with Lee around when he's going around to Washington, when Lee actually needs the numbers.
All right. Woody.
So in the late summer and early fall of 1862, the Confederates launched what is called the 1,000-mile front, where they're launching 3 kind of uncoordinated invasions of the North simultaneously. Lee's launching an invasion of Maryland. Bragg's launching an invasion of Union-occupied Kentucky. And then you've got Earl Van Dorn's army moving up to take Corinth, Mississippi, which is occupied by the Union, northeastern Mississippi. So Lee believes one more victory will gain recognition of the Confederacy by the foreign powers of England and France. So all he needs to do is go into Maryland, win a big victory there, and he thinks he'll rally the state, but he doesn't. But besides that, if he wins another big victory against the Union after his string of victories in the 7 days battles at Second Manassas or Second Bull Run, and then another victory here at Antietam, then it will convince the foreign powers to join in on this, or not join in, but like recognize the Confederacy as a diplomatic entity or a sovereign nation, and possibly even sway them into joining the war or forcing some kind of forced peace upon both warring states. And like I said, at the same time, you've got these two uncoordinated invasions of the North going on simultaneously in the West and the East. So it would be a big move if they were to win Antietam.
All right. Tegan, gotta sell a story here.
So the easiest way to win is to win. And while you can focus on the war as much as you want, there's a lot more to conflict than just conflict. You have to finance it. You have to rally support. Any chink in that armor could break any war machine. Now, there was a lot of protest against the Union. It came to a head in the New York City draft riots. But all you need to do is have a few missteps earlier on, and a lot of the public support for the war could have easily gone the other way. After the Battle of Bull Run, after the failure at Wilson's Creek, after the failure of the Battle of Ball's Bluff, and with the Trent affair going on, there were many in the Union who were seeing things turn against their way. Even before we get into 1862, 1863, where you really see it heat up, I mean, all you need is Britain sending in a note, a few different words from Queen Victoria, and the Union is looking like we're about to be destroyed from two sides, and they changed their mind. All you need is a couple senators voting a different way, and you don't have the taxes to finance the war, and Lincoln is forced to sue for peace. Sure, the battles are big and flashy, but we just need a few tactical votes going the other way, and bam, Lincoln cannot pursue the war.
Done. Pete, you ready to attack the others?
Yeah. Okay, so Battle of Antietam first. To me, it seems like a significant leap in assumption to assume that off the back of that, they would have been able to get backing from foreign powers. Like Britain was happy to sort of economically benefit from the South, but really didn't want to be seen as being politically supporting slavery. So even if Antietam had gone the right way, I'm not sure if the European powers really would have been so keen as you made out to be to sign with the Confederates. As for the Union turning, like public support, like back in the day, was nowhere near as impactful as it is in later wars. Like it all comes down to the politics, and the politicians at the top were never going to surrender. And even if things had got to a point where things were more dire, things were running out of money, those are the times when people actually become even more resolute and more stubborn.
Done. Okay. Woody?
So to counter your arguments that the European powers wouldn't recognize the Confederacy even if they'd won Antietam, right before the Maryland campaign, William Gladstone of the British Parliament, and he was the Chancellor of the Exchequer, had said that the Confederacy has created an army, they've created a navy, and they're creating a navy, and all we would need to see is one more victory, and perhaps we can recognize the South as its own independent nation. And this is before the Emancipation Proclamation, which, mind you, was an effect of the Battle of Antietam. So that's what Antietam really does keep the Europeans out because of the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, if the Confederates have won Antietam, then Lincoln would not have been able to press the Emancipation Proclamation because it was another defeat. And as for Tegan's argument, well, oh, I'm done, aren't I?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. That's all right.
Tegan?
I'm gonna be quite honest. I forgot what Pete's argument was. So.
You guys are all coming after me out of realism. But let me ask you this: how do you just get a professional army? Yeah, I mean, it would be great if it just came together and all the soldiers were fully trained. The way to have more experienced soldiers and generals working together is to have less soldiers and only get the experienced ones. There's a reason why things turned out the way they did, and it was because that was their best shot. And let's say, how are you expecting the Union to lose the Battle of Antietam? McClellan withdraws instead of standing firm? Okay. Will that be a big enough victory for we to then pursue all the way to Washington, or even for Gladstone to get the votes? I mean, the Trent Affair had passed. We can easily say, oh, if we had decimated the Army of the Potomac, yeah, sure. But that's not how we works. Even after the decimation of the Army of the Potomac at the Chancellorsville, that wasn't enough. The time had passed. Wars might be won on the battlefield, but they're funded. And politicians would vote other ways.
Done. Okay.
I was just gonna, for Tegan's argument, I was gonna say Lincoln was just gonna throw him in jail if they voted against. And he showed he wasn't hesitant to do it either. So
I mean, yeah, sure, but what was he gonna do? Arrest the entire Senate?
yeah, he could.
Good.
Well, they still promised to stick with the core amendment.
Just
Wartime measures.
arrest the ones who voted against him.
The next question is kind of on a similar footing as this one. What was the biggest mistake made by the South during the war?
Seceding.
Jeez, okay.
Yeah.
That's a big one
Nah.
again.
Wait, what?
I mean, I was basically gonna go for like, yeah, firing on Fort Sumter.
Wait, we could just negate the war?
I mean, technically, if you just don't surrender, yeah, sure. But
Okay, is this too close to the last one? What do you guys think?
it's going to be in parallel to the question after it, so I think it's worthwhile.
Okay, all right.
Or we should close the scope.
Yeah, maybe closing the scope would be good. Yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
sure there is quite a big. There's a long list of mistakes the South made. So starting the war.
I'm gonna have to go with. Geez, I want to say I guess I don't know. You guys go first. I can't think of one at the moment.
I'm really struggling.
Am I gonna have to pick first?
I don't want to go with the stereotypical ones that everyone jumps to, like I want to say Pickett's charge, but that's just more of an isolated case.
I'll go having Longstreet do his Tidewater operation, taking him away from the Battle of Chancellorsville.
Very specific.
Yeah.
I'll
Very
go with-
different than this.
I'll go with not following up the victory at First Bull Run, First Manassas for the and just straight up taking DC or just something, just basically just not following up the victory there.
Pete, you can always go broad strokes. You can take this even away from a battle. It could be like lack of diplomacy. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm really trying to think of something that I can use here. Trying to tap into the resources of my brain and see what I've got. God, I'm out of depth on this one. All right, I'll just go with I'll go with not committing enough men to Mississippi and stopping Grant.
Okay. Start with Tegan.
The Confederates' greatest victory was at Chancellorsville, but it cost General Stonewall Jackson was one of their best champions. And where was Lee's right-hand man? Well, he was in North Carolina trying to get supplies. It was a small thing. They expected nothing really to come of it. He was supposed to take a single town, ease the supply issues. What happens if Lee had just decided it's not worth it? He would have his full army there, and he could actually pursue. He threw everything together at Chancellorsville. Had he had Longstreet, he would have a lot more to throw together. The entire Union flank was destroyed. You have another army, well, maybe he could have encircled. He had the perfect opportunity. Why couldn't he pursue? His men were tired. You have more men, you can pursue. When it comes down to it, the Confederates suffered with numbers, give them more numbers. Just a simple not doing something would have been able to grant him a victory he could have been very proud of.
Done. Woody?
So it's the evening of July 21st, 1861, and the Union Army of Northeastern Virginia has essentially fallen apart after 12 hours of fighting at the Battle of Bull Run or Manassas. The Confederates start to pursue him, but only for maybe like a mile. And then General Beauregard calls off the pursuit because his troops are equally exhausted. However, if General Beauregard and Joe Johnston had decided to keep pressing the attack on this routed, shattered Union force after Bull Run, they might very well have taken the capital. They were in the process, the Union, of building only 2 forts around Washington, D.C. at the time of Bull Run, and they were not even half finished yet. So the Confederates had a perfect opportunity after Bull Run to completely just basically sweep into Washington and take it while they still had the opportunity, because McClellan hadn't come in and reformed the army yet. So they basically routed a ragtag mob of militiamen, and then the forts aren't set up yet. This was probably their best opportunity to take Washington, D.C. at like with their army, because there's no forts. The army is basically falling apart. This is their best opportunity in the whole war to just end it right there in 3 months.
Perfect. Pete. Good luck.
Get my notes ready. Okay, the big advantage that the South had during the war is that they were effectively on the defensive. I know that the South starts the war, but at the end of the day, all the South needs to do is just hold out and keep fighting, and the Union will, like, the North will just lose the political momentum. Like, so long as they can just hold out, they're fine. In regards to that, it should have been apparent that the Mississippi was going to be the backbone of everything. That if the Mississippi was lost and that the South got split in two, that was basically going to be game over. Rather than focusing forces on trying to be aggressive, oh, I just threw my pen. Rather than trying to be aggressive in the East and trying to like take Washington, it would have been better just to bide the time, protect and defend the crucial point of Mississippi, and just wait for the Union to fall apart itself. Because all they were doing in the East, because they were just committing resources there, just burning resources, trying to get a quick victory over a like Lincoln, who was not going to allow a quick defeat to happen. He was always going to be in it for the long game. So their best chance was to stall and to play the defensive. And the Mississippi campaign is the entire crux of that. Once the Mississippi campaign is lost, the South's defense basically goes.
I'd like to do the first counter argument, if that's all right.
Go right
No.
All right. So as great as the Mississippi campaign is and the Western theater is in terms of interest in the Civil War, the entire focus of the Civil War, really, when it comes down to it, is in the Eastern theater of Virginia. The Union Confederate capital is only 95 miles apart. Everyone's looking at that front of the war. Lincoln even says, after like the Union victories in the spring of '62 in the Western theater, why is everyone looking at, like, why is everyone basically doom and gloom about the war when we're doing great in the West? Well, because they're not doing well in the Eastern theater against Virginia. So the Eastern theater is really where the war would be fought and won. And then when it comes to Longstreet's Tidewater operations, I mean, supply, yes, having the whole army at Chancellorsville would have been great, and it would have probably contributed to an even more decisive victory. But imagine if the Confederates had just been able to win the war right then and there in 3 months by just taking the capital when it was completely undefended, practically.
Done. Poor Pete. You good?
I mean, yeah, practically undefended. Luckily, there was no other army under no other general in the area who could have possibly been moved back, which is why McDowell lost, because he didn't have Patterson's command of 18,000. And pursuing an enemy is easier said than done. What was your suggestion? Give the Confederates Red Bull so they charge out through the night?
Yeah.
I mean, Jefferson Davis pushed his commanders to charge, and they just couldn't really. I mean, where are you going to say we just magically give them the power? They tried. They actually did have enemies facing them. And the Battle of Bull Run, neither side fully engaged their forces. Sure, if they had a bunch of horses to charge after the enemy and cut all of them down, They could have, but they just didn't have that kind of support. And we give more men to the Western Theater. Where would they come from? Out of nowhere? Grant was notorious for capturing large amount of enemy forces at low cost. You could have dealt with it.
Done. Pete, swing for the fences.
Okay, yeah, Woody, you're right. Most of it is fought in the Virginia theater, but I'm saying that's exactly part of the problem, was that it was fought there. The South didn't recognize the importance of the Mississippi theater. They were too focused on the Virginia campaign, as demonstrated by reality. That's where they put the majority of their resources. That's where the majority of fighting was done. They should have concentrated more on the Mississippi, because it would have allowed them to prolong the war, and prolonging the war would have been the way to win the war. Like, both of you have chosen episodes which are small scale, tactical changes, and then we make these grand assumptions off the back of it. That, you know, if you change this one tactical thing, we could take the capital, or if you change this, you'd have the army that will win the war. But these are so many assumptions involved here. No one is going to disagree with the fact that the Mississippi, if it was held, would have allowed the South to prolong the war for longer, and that's the crux of what a Southern victory would have been.
Done. I didn't want to give it to you, Pete, before, but if I had to face this question, I would have said to surrender.
To surrender?
Yeah, to try and cut a deal with the North for the best they could get, like slavery for another 20 years, and then we got to cut it or something like that.
Yeah, maybe a compromise.
I'm just glad you guys didn't look further into my argument, because I actually had a flaw in my argument. Because the Union actually had a whole division of reserves that wasn't engaged at Bull Run. So I'm glad you guys didn't single out my flaw, the chink in my argument there.
Well,
like Woody's so knowledgeable about it that he can like argue against himself.
Yeah. Well, the other side of the coin now. What was the biggest mistake that the North made during the entire war?
Oh God,
that's a pretty interesting one.
Do I go for the joke answer?
Go for it. I want it.
Don't let me free the slaves.
Whoa, Jesus!
I'm not saying that's like my argument. I'm just saying, like,
you know what? I would go for not giving Dan Sickles full command of the Army of the Potomac.
Okay. I was gonna go with giving McClellan field command.
Oh man, you took mine. Well, I'd go with I suppose I have to think on that one, actually. I'm sorry.
Take your time.
That's all right, don't worry.
I think the audience is at this point watching. It's like whatever Woody says, that's the actual answer to the question.
I suppose I guess I'll just have to go with not putting Grant in a higher command earlier in the war. I guess. I don't know exactly. It's not my best argument, but that's the one I'll have to go with.
You know what? Here, Pete, you go first in case Woody comes up with something a little better.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so giving McClellan actual field command is the biggest mistake that the North make. The guy was good off the battlefield, good drilling the army, getting it into shape, but like he just did not have the mentality that was needed. Like in the same way that I was saying before, that the South needed to stall, they needed to prolong. The Union needed a quick victory. They needed someone who was going to be able to move fast and be aggressive, and McClellan was just not that guy. In the Peninsula campaign, in the Maryland campaign, he's passive. He doesn't actually like seize the initiative. He doesn't actually move aggressively, which is what he needs to do. And Teton, which we talked about before, is like a perfect example of that, where you know he's got like 3 cigars rolled with like Charles Lee's battle plans. So he knows what the enemy's going to do. He knows that Lee's forces are split, and so he knows that he could potentially defeat Lee in detail if he actually acted on this intelligence. But it takes him 18 hours before doing it, and then the opportunity's gone, the opportunity's lost. And I know that Antietam, yeah, it is a like a sort of a minor victory in the end, of politically an important victory, but it could have been a much more impactful victory. It could have been the end of Lee's army there and then if McClellan had the initiative to act on the intelligence.
I got another one. I got another one now. Now that you can just edit out, I suppose, the stuff.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, don't worry.
The Trent affair in the Civil War.
All
So,
right. You want to go?
sure, I'll go. So on November 8th, 1861, the USS San Jacinto, which is a steam screw frigate in the Union Navy, intercepts a Royal Navy mail or a Royal Mail Packet steamer, the RMS Trent, which is carrying 2 Confederate diplomats on their way to England to represent the Confederacy and try to gain recognition from England. So the USS San Jacinto intercepts a ship, boards it, and forcibly removes the 2 Confederate diplomats and then takes them prisoner back to the United States in the North. This causes outrage in England because they boarded an English ship and literally took off 2 diplomats going to England. So the prime minister actually even was like outraged by this and was saying, "Oh, we need war for this insult to our national honor and all that stuff." So it's one of the biggest mistakes of the war, in my opinion, for the Union, because they basically almost went to war with another country in the midst of fighting a civil war.
It's a really good one. I was not aware of. There's another instance where England went to war for a really petty reason. What is someone's
Wait.
ear?
Another? You mean all of the time?
All of it. Tegan, go for it.
Sometimes during war, you need to take a risk. Sometimes you need to go balls to the wall and just say, to hell with it. Daniel Sickles was that man. Grant was the man who could fight. Sherman brought the war to himself. Daniel Sickles would have walked in front of his troops and slapped Robert E. Lee in the face during parley just to assert dominance, because that's the kind of man he was. He was a madman, but he wasn't stupid. During the Battle of Chancellorsville, the Confederates' greatest victory, how did they solidify it? They put up an artillery park and decimated the Union line against Joseph Hooker. Who foresaw that? Daniel Sickles. Gettysburg, the turning point of the war to so many. They were going around ready to strike Little Round Top and roll up the flank. Who stopped them? Daniel Sickles. Who killed the relative of the man who wrote the Star Spangled Banner? Daniel Sickles. That has nothing to do with this. I just love bringing it up. The man could fight, the man could recruit, and the man could energize. That's what you need in a warrior. So many generals failed Lincoln. He traded them like Pokemon cards. Well, this is his foil Charizard. This is his foil Charizard.
Good. Oh my god, that ending.
I love the passion.
Yeah, Pete.
Okay, we'll start with the Trent affair. The problem is that, like, they almost went to war, but they didn't. So at the end of the day, like, it's barely a mistake, because if you played it out 100 other times, yeah, you almost go to war, but you don't. So I'm not even really sure if I'm counting that as a serious mistake. It was almost a mistake, but fortunately it wasn't. And as for Tegan's argument, like, Sickles sounds really cool, don't get me wrong, but the flaw in the argument, though, is that the Union won. Like, Grant and Sherman were good enough. They did get the job done. Like, what? Like, it's like, what's the mistake? It was like not putting Sickles in command, but at the end of the day, things worked out fine for the Union. Like, it wasn't a mistake. Like, if Grant and Sherman had lost, then you would have an argument that it was a mistake and that Sickles should have been command. But at the end of the day, they were successful. So it's not really a mistake. McClellan is a genuine error.
I love how the British guy's like, yeah, it's no big deal that my country almost went to war with the northern half of yours. Like, okay,
It happens.
it does happen.
Can you all excuse me for a second? I have to go to the bathroom and rethink my life.
Wow.
Oh, so we're all back.
Yeah.
I've completely lost who goes next. I think is
I'll
it
go.
Woody's rebuttal?
Oh,
Unless Tegan wants to go.
oh no, you can go first. I'm
Okay.
getting ready to bring
He's
all the
already-
energy back again.
He's already Leroy Jenkson. He's going like full in.
So when it comes to Dan Sickles, I guess all I can say is like, I mean, having Dan Sickles in command of the Army of the Potomac by the time of Gettysburg, I mean, yeah, he's very balls to the wall, I suppose, but I mean, is that what you want in a general sometimes when you're trying to win a critical campaign? You don't want like someone going all out and reckless, like such as Lee did at Gettysburg with Pickett's charge, and it cost him a whole division of his army practically. When it comes to Pete's argument, McClellan, yes, he was a terrible field commander, but when it came to administrative role, McClellan was actually a pretty great general. The army that he trained in the summer and fall of 1861 became the Army of the Potomac. That was his army. Even in the later campaigns of the Civil War, he made the Army of the Potomac, and they were his troops.
All right. Tegan.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was not the entire hype around Grant that he kept on moving forward? Was that not the strategy that won the war? And yeah, McClellan sucked. Unfortunately, the people around him sucked more. John Pope got the army destroyed before. That's what happens when you replace McClellan. And who did they replace McClellan with? You had Burnside, who threw his army up at Fredericksburg. And who was going to come after him? Joseph Hooker. I mean, sure, if you had your all-star Army of the Potomac with the perfect commanders, yeah, that would be better than him. But life didn't work out that way. And yeah, the Trenton Affair could have went poorly, but also what were we supposed to do? Just let that happen? We couldn't just allow Confederate diplomats going along. We had laws in place. And when we did let them out, everything turned out fine. Britain was still willing to sell us arms. It was a close call, but it was a close call. Nothing really big came of it. That's why I poorly covered it in my week-by-week series, because it wasn't worth it.
Oh, a plug-in. All right.
No, I fucked that up. Yeah, no, straight up. If you look at my Trent Affair episodes, even the pronunciations are
The
bad.
funny thing about the Trent Affair too is like afterwards, the British were like the British diplomat or politicians were like, wait, we made all this fuss over these guys.
They were the most useless diplomats of all time, and that does
Yeah.
go by today's diplomats.
All they did was like secure a loan from some French company, which I'm sure the French company sure did regret after that.
All right.
Wow.
Ooh, Pete had to go to the bathroom again. He's back.
Okay,
Pete-
yeah. So just a bit with the cards. For Patreons, we're doing Patreons in certain tiers. I believe it's the top 2 tiers. They get to suggest a historical character of their choice, and we will rank them according to like how good or how bad they are, and then you get made into a card, and it'll be like hand done by an artist. Everyone's going to be unique, and we want to make sure that all our guests have got one of these as well. So yeah, we rank them from 1 to 5. You can choose any historical character that you want, and we'll get a card made for you guys and make sure that you guys get it as a little thank you for spending time with us, basically.
Yeah.
So
Obviously.
Woody,
I'll go with General Ulysses S. Grant.
And now, when we're thinking about the tiers from 1 to 5, what
Sorry,
would you give them?
which one was higher again?
5.
five's the top. Like if we're doing like generals, then like 5 would be like Napoleon.
Okay, I'll put him at 4.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Then I'll pick General Moshe Dayan, and I would put him at a 5 just because of the situation he was in.
It's one of the most intense wars that, I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy, the story of the 6-Day War. It's nuts.
Yeah. All right. Michelin gonna be cool. Artist's gonna have a good time with him.
Yeah.
I'll just give him the 5 for the eye patch, honestly.
Yeah.
We'll rate him on
Badass.
his fashion.
I really was reading about Michelin, and like his eye patch got auctioned How
Yeah.
much do you reckon? Do you know how much it went for?
I don't.
Okay, how much would you pay for Mushidaran's iPad in dollars?
How much would I pay for a man's iPad?
There's been weirder things bought on OnlyFans accounts.
I'd give him a tenner.
Tenner.
A tenner.
75 grand it went for. Oh,
5 grand.
yes, man.
Well, before we let you guys go, if you could just, give that plug in, just to let the audience know something about your channel again, in case they don't already know. Why should they check out Tegan first?
Yeah, I do Civil Week by Week where I make no mistakes ever. And I am 100% perfect at doing everything I can do to mispronounce every Native American name, mispronounce my own native language, and find a way to somehow mix up numbers to this day.
I'm going to use that slogan for myself. Change the Native Americans for, Chinese and that, but yeah. All right.
That's good.
Woody?
So, come check out our channel Warhawk if you're interested in watching animated battle maps of Civil War battles like as they happened, moment by moment. And our next project we're working on is the Battle of Glendale, which is the second to last of the 7 days battles. So it'll be a pretty exciting episode when it comes out.
All right. So you heard it here, folks. Please check both of them out. Like and subscribe, hopefully to all of us, so we can keep the lights on over here. And well, this has been Questioning History.